So, okay, I guess we can start into it. Eric, I know you know the boilerplate. You've seen this a few times, so Esri is sponsoring it. We got a code of conduct. Um, the speakers stuff is the same as it was. Let me make sure I'm recording. I think I'm recording.
You are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the only thing we've added is we've actually come up with a rough curriculum and wanted to show where we're at with this. So this is the data wrangling session. There's a number of theoretical future sessions that we have to get to, but we felt that the data understanding was fairly fundamental to moving forward with other things. So that's where this fits in. And yeah, just as a reminder that we may get technical, but the general idea is to try and enlighten brigades further about the ways in which these tools that they have access to can be used by any of their civic project work teams. It's there's a whole lot in ArcGIS Online that's not being used by brigades, and maybe that's because they don't need it, but maybe they just don't know that they have access to it. So that's what we're trying to open people's minds up a little bit. David, do you want to start with this slide, or do you want to start with the next slide?
Well, I mean, was this in the last?
I added this about 30 minutes ago.
Oh, okay, no, let's talk about types of data in ArcGIS Online. So there's a thing called feature layers that are hosted on ArcGIS Online, and it consists of points, lines, and polygons. Feature layer view is when you've symbolized it, I believe, and you're seeing it on your map. Raster data is anything that's got imagery, elevation models, basically regular grid kind of data. Points or grids. And then you have flat spatial data files, the shape files and CSV files and JSON files, all work in ArcGIS Online. You can host tables on ArcGIS Online or add tables to ArcGIS Online. And format through the Excel files or CSV files. And if you want to do related tables in ArcGIS Online, you have to do them first in ArcPro or ArcMap, and then bring them into ArcGIS Online. You can bring in documents, PDFs, Words, zip images, no movies. Attachments are not the same, whatever that means, Nick.
So if a feature of a point, a line, or a poly is able to have an attachment for it, so you can attach an image, a document, basically standard media content to a point, a line, or a poly. And this is how you would do something like drive around, take a point of a location that you're at, and take a picture and attach sort of that picture to that point, so you can keep track of those things. But keeping track of attachments, the images that are saved or the documents that might be attached to a point or a line or a poly, it's not the same as just ArcGIS Online keeping track of images. So you can upload PDFs, words, whatever Word files to ArcGIS Online, and it just stores them there as something that you can share with the world if you want to, or you can share with your group, or you can use in your hub websites or your other things. And that stuff is maintained separately from the attached media that might be attached to points, lines, and polys.
Yeah, and the images typically are, there's two ways to store the images. One is ArcGIS Online, the other one is directly from your photo or your photo site, right?
Yeah, you can link. You can create links. That's right. Whoa, hello.
Hello.
Apparently, I'm getting email all of a sudden. Go away.
So,
Whoa! Stop! Why
yeah,
is it doing
you
that?
have to kill it, Nick.
Uh,
Okay.
okay.
There's various application definition types in ArcGIS Online, such as a web map. There's the map. There's a web map. There's a hub page, dashboard, survey 123. There's I think we'll cover those. We covered them last week, but we can cover them again. These
Yeah,
are just JSON blobs that get fed into various ArcGIS Online templated applications.
and I thought maybe if I can, let me just switch over to, oops, since I'm presenting, I was going to show in ArcGIS Online real quick where people would see this stuff. So if you're in the content tab in ArcGIS Online and you're looking, you see this is a table that's hosted, a feature layer that's hosted, a feature layer view, and a shapefile, web map, hub page, image. So that's what we're kind of covering, is the different types of things that might be stored in ArcGIS Online. Here is what this slide was all about.
I wanted to click on the 3x3 dots up by your face. So those are all the different apps that come in ArcGIS Online.
Right. So Survey 123 saves its documents as surveys, or Hub here saves its pages as Hub pages. We're over there. They're somewhere around here. Yeah, down here, Hub page. So yeah, each of those apps stores its own data files in ArcGIS Online alongside all of your spatial data, your non-spatial data. Yeah. So go away. Okay.
So the way ArcGIS Online works, I mean, you can add and edit data. So you can look for data, you can export your own version of the data. And last week I did cover how you edit the data. I don't think I'll go through that again. Did we record last time?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Creating data, I don't think I covered. I mean, you're basically bringing in a CSV or an Excel file into your map. And maybe I'll get around to showing that. The other way to bring in a table, if you bring in a JSON file, you need to, a Excel file, you need to be able to have something that links to a space and time. So you have the longitude or an XY columns, or if you have a table that has an ID, such as in Vermont, if you have E911 sites, every building in the state of Vermont has an eSites ID. So if you have another table that's coded by eSites ID, you can join it to the point file that exists under the eSites feature layer that's online. The same thing applies to town boundaries. If you've got town boundary lists and you have data by town, you can join just on the name of the town. Spelling is a critical issue here. There's a lot of people in the state of Vermont not using codes instead of towns. They're actually using towns to join and link. So it's not a great way to do it, but it's there. And
I was going to show that for importing, like import CSV, you can say add item from your computer, and this thing kind of magically determines what you're doing based on the type of file. So if it's a CSV, when you choose the file, it will take the appropriate action to let you import the CSV as a data set. The same would be true for Excel, JSON, and it allows you to do the attribute mapping and keying and stuff.
Basically puts it into your content.
Right. It just shows up right here. So that's the quick way to do the imports. And okay.
And have them readily available. They don't have to always look them up, like
right.
me.
Yeah.
I just went dark.
You went, you went,
Uh,
you went dark.
yeah, my screen went silent. Went, you know,
Okay. Eric? Can you still see the presentation or my screen?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
yeah.
Well, the next thing on the slide, I guess, if you can't see it, David.
It's back up. It was
Oh,
my screen went to sleep.
okay. Collect data. I think that's where we are at. Is that right?
Yep. So anything you put on ArcGIS Online, you can share with anybody, and you can set the editable properties. And I think I showed that last week as well. It says it's shared with public, but in secure. Well, you can set up your own group that you're sharing data with, and we have it. And you did create a code for BTV group, I think, Nick.
Yeah. There should be groups that are available for many
And if
different
you have a
brigades.
project you're working with a bunch of people, you create the group and then you invite people to participate in that.
Yeah. And for public, I mean, it's insecure. But if you really want to crowdsource stuff from just anybody without any checking, you could
Yeah.
set up a publicly shared editable layer. Not highly recommended, but
All right, now I go on to the next slide and get into the nitty gritty here.
okay. Do you want to take over screen
Why
sharing?
don't I take charge if I can?
I think you have ability to take over screen sharing. I will stop my share.
Screen one. Okay. I'm not a Google. What do I do? Oh, slide, present.
There's a button up in the upper right side that's present. It's white next to the yellow button.
Covered by my picture.
Ah, yes.
Okay, so moving right along here. So what I tried to do in terms of preparing for this session is how do you look at how do you manage, how do you work with all the different kinds of data to get different results without having to code a lot of things? And so what I'm going to focus on is what an ArcGIS is called data analysis tools. And we'll cover them. We're not going to cover them all because there's too many, but they're under categories called use proximity, which includes buffers, drive time areas, find the nearest, plan routes, connect origins and destinations. Another set on managing the data. This is where there's all boundaries, extract data, generate tessellations. Why to put that one in there and haven't done a lot of other statistical ones, I'm not sure. Merge layers and overlay layers. So you'll be working with dissolve, extract, merge, and overlay quite a bit. And then on summarize, aggregating points, which I'm not exactly a big user of that one, but it's there. Join features is a real common one. Summarize nearby is not so much, but summarize within is something that you'll want to play with and use. Summarize center and dispersion, another one that I'm not wild about using. Calculate, and then they analyze patterns. We got density, hotspots, outliers, point clusters, interpolation of points. And then if I can move my pictures out of the way here, find locations. So you can find existing locations, derive new locations, find centroids, find similar locations, choose best facilities, create view sheds, create watersheds, and then trace downstream. So these are all the data analytics you can do in ArcGIS Online, and on top of all the other tools that are in the feature layer itself. So these are to work on one or more. In most cases, it's working on two feature layers that are tables to do the analysis. So if you go back to, if we look at join features tool, it takes the attributes from one layer or table based on a spatial attribute and attribute relationship, and the statistics can then be calculated and then join features. And if I can bring up my Map.
You might have to cancel this presentation, like exit the presentation to.
Oh yeah. If I could share my other screen, it'd be great. Huh. I seem to have lost it. So the one thing you'll want to notice about the slideshow when I get back to it. So what I've done here today, I played around with all the different things you could do. So I had to add a bunch of data, but most of the data that's available in Vermont is huge. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time tonight trying to go through everything. So this joining function that I did was, I looked at telecommunication facilities, and I looked at town boundaries, which in this case, I just chose Calais and Worcester, and you'll see all the telecommunication towers in the state of Vermont. And if you go to analyze, someplace. Oh, here's the problem. I wonder why it won't let me analyze. You have to be signed in to do a lot of things because you're using credits. Nick will talk about that later. So anyway, I've got the two towns that I selected. All I did, and this was filtered to the two towns. So I narrowed down the 251 to two towns, and then I've got the telecommunications facilities there. And then under the analysis, I can do the join features by choosing what's the target. I want the Vermont town boundaries, and I want telecommunication facilities 1-to-1. I want to make sure I did that right. Anyway, so you have multiple choices as you choose the spatial relationship, intersect, so it's completely contains. So you get a couple of traces there you have to make. I don't care about matching fields, and then join 1-to-1. And there's a lot of choices you don't have to deal with. But then when you run the analysis, it's going to want me to give it another name because I've already got it done. But that's how you do this joining. And the reason I don't want to do it is it's going to take a little while to spin it up and do it. But and so I think when I did that, I ended up with a town map with a new layer of the two towns showing you the towers. So there's one at the elementary school in Worcester, and there's one in the oops, I got way too many things turned on in Calais parcels. So you end up with information from Gwen, come on in. Hi, Gwen. So that's how you do the join. And the one thing that you end up, what did I run the next one? Yeah. So you can do feature to table or feature to feature in terms of joining. You end up with a whole new layer. So when you do all these tools, you ended up creating new feature layers and new content to your map and into your ArcGIS Online content. So the next tool that you'll find fairly useful is overlay. And here's where you combine two or more layers into a single layer, a single new layer. You can think of this as a peering through a stack of maps and creating a single map containing all the information found in the stack. Um, so this is straight from their webpage. Overlay is much more than merging the work. All the attributes of the features taking part in overlay are carried through in the final product. So you end up with all the attributes from both layers when you do overlay. One of the things I did in this presentation, which I assume everybody's has available, Nick.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
So every title of every slide, I've given you a link to the documentation. It's on ArcGIS Online, which is a lot more detailed than I'm going to cover tonight. Not only do they give you the workflow diagram, they give you usage, they explain the different methods of overlay, which I am not going to cover, but there's intersect, union, and erase, which means different ways of relating the data to one another. And typically, oh, they don't show it. Usually they have an example. Yeah, they do have an example here. So when you have time on your own and you want to go explore the overlay function, ArcGIS Online's documentation is pretty phenomenal. And so I highly recommend it. But so anyway, I've labeled all the titles so that you can hyperlink to the full description on ArcGIS Online. So if I go back to my map, I intersected wetlands, which covered the whole state of Vermont, with Calais. So I only have Calais wetlands now, and Worcester wetlands. So it's a fairly straightforward. You go in the analytical tool and overlay. You get all the choices. You have to pick your input layer and your overlay layer, the city you want to merge with it, and whether you want to intersect, union it, or erase it. So it's a pretty powerful tool. I'm not going to run it because it does take a bit of time.
So erasing is useful if you want to maybe intersect and union a bunch of things, but then there's one thing you don't want, so your final step might be to erase something out of, I don't know, if there's maybe there's a region that's owned by somebody who doesn't want their data included or something, you can cut that right out.
Get rid of them, yeah. So overlay is a pretty fundamental GIS concept. And if you're not used to doing it in GIS, I mean, it's not something you see in Google or anywhere else, but it's a slick tool. It's been around. It's one of the earliest GIS functions created before when everything was done on the desktop or on the server. Moving right on to the next tool is a thing called dissolve boundaries. And this one's pretty useful because you have one feature layer that's got a lot of characteristics, and the one I'm going to demonstrate or talk about is I've got town boundaries, and in the attribute table for town boundaries, there's a field called county. So if I go to town boundaries, and I go to analyze, and I want to dissolve boundaries. So you pick the town boundaries area, the field name that you're going to dissolve on, and there it is, county. Oops, field value. So if I choose county, maybe. There's. Don't know why it's not picking it. Anyway, it's supposed to work.
It's odd.
Let's see what happens when I try it again. I was finding trouble today with, I might have put too much stuff on this, but let's try it again. Town boundaries, analysis, manage data, dissolve boundaries. I'm going to pick town boundaries.
You got areas with the same field value. Can you like click twice? I don't know. Is it?
Yeah.
Can you do it on the other town boundaries? It's not a copy.
Well, this other one is okay. If I do this one, I'm only going to get 2. It's only callous. Oh, that worked. You know why? Anyway, you're going to find a very funny county now. Should be pretty quick too. So up here is showing you that it's working, and the reason I don't show them all is because this one should be pretty fast since there's only 2 towns. It should give me a new, yeah, it gave me the new county of Worcester. So when I open the table, it should only be 1 feature. Oh, oops.
Wrong layer.
Wrong. Should only be 1 feature. There we go. County 23.
The new Vermont county.
Yeah, Vermont County. Calais, Worcester. So that's how dissolve works. I find it a fairly powerful tool when you don't have data that you're trying to either you can't find it or you want to make up a new set of it. So in that case, I created counties, even though counties are pretty readily available in Vermont. Let's go to present. Here's one that most people. Oops, I screwed up. No, I didn't. Oh. In terms of buffering an area, and you're going to put whether it's a point, a polygon, or a line, you can buffer it with any distance that you want, and it's a pretty powerful tool to whether you're working on wetlands or roads or school drug use or whatever. It's pretty good. And so similarly,
The typical question is like how, from this location within X distance, what is related to this item. So in, I don't know, you might say how many farms are within let's say 500 feet from this this stream or something like that, and you can measure that distance out from the stream.
So here's a case where I have wetlands only in Calais and Worcester, and I want to do a buffer on it. And so I end up no. Buffer. This is why I printed out. They use proximity. Okay. Buffers. So in this case, I want to work with wetlands in Calais and so those are the wetlands within Calais, and I'm going to do it by 250 feet of a wetland. So you have to change all the things, and it's at 250. Always label your stuff. I mean, I've done a very good job here, but the result layer names are really important when you're doing these processes, so that you know what you get when you finish. And so in this case, I end up with 250-foot buffers around it. And if I show you what it looks like, there it is. So I'll kill that. Go back to our slide. So buffers are one of those things you can do a lot with. And go to the next one. Merging layers. So here's where you've got 2 layers into a new layer. In this case, it has to be the same feature type. So if you look at this diagram, you've got lines and polygons and points here, and you've got another set of data that's points. You can, when you do a merge, you can only do it on one feature type. So the points from this first set of images came into the next one. So you can see the three points here ended up, well, somehow they're both there anyway. I mean, I'm not sure. This picture is not great. So did I do this right? If I look at what I did, so merging is one of those things where here's a case where, in this example that I'm going to show, I had parcel boundaries for towns, parcels for Calais, and I wanted to look at how many wetlands there are in Calais. So
Get manage data.
manage data.
The bottom, I
Yeah.
think, isn't it? Yeah, there it is.
Merging here, you get to you know, the Calais town boundaries parcels. So you have to choose the two sets you want to work with. And so in this case it was town parcels and then wetlands. And then when I did it, details, I have, oh no, I did it with rooftops.
Rooftops.
Yeah. So yeah.
So I think, I mean, to me, the value of merge layers is frequently if you have multiple. Let's say you want you want to make a bigger data set out of multiple
Right.
chunks of smaller data that are all the same. So if you have, let's just say COVID deaths by county, and you want to say what the COVID deaths by state are, and they're all points or something, you could say merge all the COVID deaths by county into one big state thing.
Right.
But you can do it with any similar data.
So, and one of the advantages of doing this is now that you've added different content to another data set, you can do summarizations just symbolizing the feature type by the new information you merged with the old information. So it allows you to enhance the analysis capacity on each of these data sets. So the other tool that comes up next is extracting data. And in this case, you select and download data for a specified area of interest, and then it sends you a zip file or a layer package. And so, if you go back to their examples they're given, there's you can export it to CSV, a geodatabase, a KML, or a shapefile. And so you can clip and you can select features. This is not a tool that I've used in ArcGIS on very on. I don't know if you've ever used it, Nick.
It's not typically. I just download the entire data layer, but I can understand where you would be on a map, let's say, that has a lot of stuff on it, and you just want some small chunk of that map to download that data as a zip file. That is pretty much the use case for it. And I think it's something frequently they kind of bake the extract data tool into a lot of their apps that let you download data as well. So uh, it's a way that they can make it easier for users to get the data that they want out of the large, high quality national data sets that might be provided by Esri. Um, yeah, it's sort of it's one way to get data that you could reuse. There's lots of other ways to get data that you could reuse as well. But especially if you're trying to bring the data into a different system, if you're trying to make a copy of the data for your own purposes, if there was a government owned data set, say your state or county has a data set and you want just the data for a particular county, and then you're going to want to take that data and you're going to want to make a copy of it and do your own things with that data. You could use this to get the data out of the state owned data set.
And when you're using some of these tools, you got to be careful not to miss some of the boxes that are check boxes. In this case, it says use current map extent.
Yeah.
And so if you turn that off, you'll get your data set totally. But you only want what's showing on the map, you can run it that way. So it's sort of a
And to be clear, map extent really just means what you can see right now of the map on the screen, the bounding box spatially of whatever we see on the screen.
so next little tool. Aggregate points. Now here's where the tool looks at a layer of the point feature and a layer of area features. And I'm still trying to figure out what a good use for this is, but you can, I think you could do the towers in a town, thing like that. It's the count of the points within that space. So in the example that I built, there were 2 towers in Worcester and 1 tower in Calais. So you end up with a circle point file as a result in aggregating points with a polygon feature. So the polygon was the town and the points were the towers. So I ended up with a point feature within the town showing what the count was of that feature.
Yeah, the use case is pretty it's a lot more specific than say merging data where you're just combining a bunch of things, because in this case there's a limitation in ArcGIS Online to how many points or how many features, if there are points, lines, or polys, you can show at once on a map in the web viewer. And you end up, if you have high density data, so an example would be if you wanted to show all of the oil wells in the Permian Basin, you would find that ArcGIS Online can't show you all of them because there's close to 100,000, and it's too many points to show at once on the web map. But if you wanted to show statistical summaries of those points, you could aggregate many points within a certain area into kind of a mega point that represents statistically what you might need to know about the individual points in that area.
And here I brought up the example in the on their documentation page, and they give you a lot of examples, use case, and also some tips. So it really is worthwhile to explore as you try different things. And it goes into quite a bit of detail. I'll leave it at that. And then we have. Oops, doesn't like me. Summarize nearby. This tool finds features within a specified distance in the analysis layer. Distances can be measured as a straight line distance or a selected travel mode. Statistics are then calculated for a nearby feature. And this one here is something that I don't use too often, but Nick, do you have any cases where you did do this?
We haven't done this, but I think that in terms of brigades and civic needs, that there's a lot more value to this particular thing because it starts to get into travel times, and certainly, it's either if you, I don't know, if you are at a location, what's the closest location? What's the closest food shelf to me, or something like that? I mean, you can um, start looking at not just, this isn't routing. This doesn't get into routing, but it does get into trying to help you identify which the closest, like it says, various types of transportation. So by walking, by driving, that kind of
One
thing.
example is, what's the total population within 5-minute driving time of a proposed new store? And I think that's sort of what they're showing on the example here. But it's a pretty powerful tool. Granted, there's so many of these. You really, as you define a project to do, you'll figure out some of the things you need to know to do what you're trying to do.
I think you skipped the calculate density one, which might be
Yeah,
interesting for storytelling purposes, at least.
yeah. And this is exactly what it sounds like. You've got a series of points, align features, and by spreading some known quantities of some phenomena represented by attributes of those points, lines on the map, you'll get it classified from the least dense to the most dense. So it actually makes a raster out of the point file representing some value in that point. So if it's store sales or income by household, you'll end up, instead of points, you'll get a distribution map that it looks like a density. I'm sure they'll have.
For example, if each point was a homeless shelter and you had a statistic on how many beds they had, this could be used. I mean, effectively, the output is it's kind of like a heat map,
Yep.
which is something that people run into fairly commonly now. So you could see a heat map in your city of which, where the most beds are and for homeless, and where the least number of beds are, and how that, use that with some of the overlay tools or the analysis tools to derive some insight.
Again, there's lots of description available on how to do it, examples on how to do it. So summarize nearby, we just did.
Yep.
Summarize within. This tool finds features and portions of those features within the boundaries and the areas in an analysis layer. So this is where you're trying to find out a subset, again, sort of a subset of data, that using one feature for another with another feature to get a result. And I didn't do an example of this one, but we'll see what they came up with. So facility inventory by district, numbers of streetlights, miles of bike routes in each district, so the projects can be prioritized effectively. So it's trying to get an assessment of what's happening where by some attribute, some content in another feature. So again, it's these are done for those who have ever used ArcGIS Map or ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. These are done slightly differently. So these are tools that they created so they can work on the web. is another tool that I have not a lot of familiarity with, but it does allow you to do some statistics. This tool finds a center feature, mean to center, a mean center or ellipse, function distribution of a point feature. So if you want to find the center of a bunch of points for whatever reason, and I'd be curious as to what.
I can give you one. Let's say that you want to look at, um, let's say, gas stations in an area, and you want to have a tour of the owners of the gas stations. You could summarize the center and dispersion. I mean, it's easiest at least to think about the center. You can say all of the gas stations in the city, create an ellipse that fits roughly all of the gas stations in the city, such that if you zoom the map to that ellipse to only show that ellipse, it will show you all the gas stations of a particular owner. And it it's it seems most useful, at least in being able to uh, drive other functionality by having a set of new features, which are these ellipses that can be fed into um, the dashboards and other mapping apps in ArcGIS Online for controlling the visibility of content.
The one example they just cited in that the tech documentation was looking at the distribution of crime by day and by night, to see if the center of it changes over day and night.
Yeah, that too.
Good use. Find existing locations. These tools find tools that pass the criteria that you specify. So this is like a plan, a city planning function or whatever. You want to find things that meet criteria. So site selection criteria. So you want to avoid wetlands. You want in a city village. In other words, this is a multiple uh, function and analytical tool, and used mainly in planning. Um, and it's pretty powerful. This one is pretty much used universally in planning functions. Um,
It also sort of replaces in in the desktop apps. You can select features by certain attributes.
right.
In the web map, in ArcGIS Online, it's harder to do that, but with this tool, you can effectively do the same thing.
Right. More on the attribute locational finding.
Yeah.
And then you can also derive new locations. In this particular tool, you select an existing feature in your study area that meets a series of criteria that you specified. And these criteria can be based on attribute queries, for example, parcels that are vacant, and spatial queries, spatials within 1 mile of a river, and you end up with what's left. So it's a sort of combined analysis resulting in what's left after you've done the analysis. And this is also another, in my mind, a planning function.
Right.
And then finding similar locations. So then you specify the similarity of one candidate search to another with a more reference location. So you get two different data sets with similar criteria. You can, yes, actually, based on criteria specified, the find similar locations tool measures the similarity of locations in your candidate search layer for one or more reference. This is more difficult than I had thought. Let's see. Some development company is looking for a great location to build a new retirement community. They use the enriched layer tool to obtain demographic data, and then they want to find similar locations that meet those criteria. So I guess you can use it on polygons, points. But again, before you use these tools, these are probably pretty good lookups for you to follow and follow along on. Um, choose best facilities. This tool finds a set of facilities that best serve demand from surrounding area. This is a sort of a network kind of analysis. And Nick, did you say that there are people who would be doing network kinds of analyses?
Um, I think that there's interest in more in terms of distance driving and walking specifically
Yeah.
to various services and resources. So what's the, I don't know, closest library to me or something like that. So I'm not sure if this is the only tool for that kind of thing, but
And is network analyst functions available on ArcGIS Online, the license you have?
uh, no, I don't think so. But does this one actually require a network analyst? I think it's just
Oh, to do some of it, it does. I just want to make sure that
okay.
speaking out of turn there. No, you don't need it for everything, but if you're going to do a road network thing, you probably need the network. This next one, which is surprisingly fun to play with, is creating a view shed. This tool creates areas where an observer can see objects on the ground. The input analysis points represent either the observer, such as people on the ground or a lookout in a fire tower, or observed objects, such as a wind tower, water towers, vehicles, other kinds of features. The result areas are those areas that where the observer can see the observed objects and vice versa. So you can reverse this analysis. And this is typically done with sighting of large objects, whether it's a wind tower or a cell tower or even a high building. You can use this tool to represent that. It's a sort of a pretty. It may take a little while to generate, but it does work, and it's pretty powerful.
I could see a brigade that's helping a community with, for example, a community internet rollout for perhaps like one of those community mesh Wi-Fi sort of rollouts
Yeah.
might have interest in using this tool.
So that's sort of the in terms of the other one, similar thing, catchment areas based on locations you specify. And all these, you need an elevation model. A DEM in Vermont has one. So this is something you can actually do in Vermont. And it will create your watershed based
There's,
on a.
I mean, there's national elevation models, but the resolution is not typically as high for the national models, I think, as it is for the newer local models.
And some of the issues, if you get to work at a really local scale, you might find that the elevation data that you think you're doing catchments in a city, when in fact the city is mechanically or engineered drainage catchments that are totally different than the landscape. So you got to be very careful if you're going to measure a map watersheds or catchments in a city, because in the city of Burlington they have basically physically changed watersheds based on drainage, stormwater drainage catchments based on where they've built stormwater drains. And so they've sort of corrupted the elevation data for that purpose. So you got to be careful depending on your application.
I know that at 6 o'clock, the um, event wasn't really specifically supposed to end at 6, but I think that it might have been marketed as 5 to 6. So If people need to go, that's okay. This will be recorded, but please stay on if you can, and we'll get through it soon.
I want to enrichment tool. Okay. So if you take the reason I want to show enrichment for everybody's purpose is that if you take, I'm not going to run this because it'll take a long time, but if you take town boundaries for the whole state of Vermont, for every town, and enrichment will let you select out of population. You just do a click. So you got a forecast, and you can do a whole bunch of other things with it. And then you want to go back to I want income. So they have 5,000 variables you can enrich your polygon data by. So it keeps on going. I mean, it's probably more important to look at what you can do here. They have everything on age, by age distribution, by single year, by groups of years,
Race.
under over 65. Everything you want to know about households. They have a whole bunch of information on disability, household totals, types. They don't. I mean, they're not lacking in terms of information. And so there you go. Household disability with how many people, blah blah blah. So it's pretty robust in terms of you don't know something that you really like to know about. This is a great place to you can go, education by how many people finished with bachelor's degree and just high school and never finished high school. This is where you find out, and it's available for every geography that you can use. Same thing with businesses. You know how many businesses there are by SIC code, how many employees, and what the salaries were for those businesses. Industry by codes. Now it's pretty sales. You have sales as well. Raise spending, how much money is spent, retail goods monthly by that geography, clothing, education. So you can actually, how much education money was spent last year, this year. So these are all estimates that are done by Esri and its partners. They have a whole set of poverty figures. And Tapestry is, Esri's, what I call it, psychological demographic profile of a community or geography by, I think, 75 different kinds of profiles with those funky names, which right now I can't remember all of them, but they're...
I mean, the names are like up-and-coming hipsters or something like that. I mean, it's... they're pretty ridiculous.
I mean, it's got some...
Yeah, rural aging hippies. I don't know. I mean, they're pretty specific.
So there's so much, and then the jobs one with the daytime population is it's working, unemployment rates. So if you need to get data for a project you're working on, very specifically down to a census tract, or I think it goes down to census tract, maybe census block group, you can do that right here by just, using the enrich tool, and it's pretty powerful. So it says I've selected 2 attributes, and I'll just let it go because now I can't see it because
cancel is at the bottom.
I was blocking it. Okay, so that's how you do the enrichment, and you can do an area. You can do line distance, so you can actually pick. It gives you more than that, but you can choose the geography that you want someplace. Yeah, there it is right there. So that would add that information for every town in the state of Vermont. So it may take a little while to run, but it actually is pretty potent. So it returns a new feature layer with an attribute for all the items you have chosen. And it's one of the more useful functions in ArcGIS Online. And I will stop that there. Where'd you see the cancel, Nick?
Oh, this one you just go back to details or get out of the analysis tab.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's sort of I think did I cover all the tools? I'm not sure.
Uh,
Oh, hotspots. Yeah.
Hotspot
Really
analysis.
significant clustering in your data. This is something if you want to find out whether there's a relationship between two different sets of data. So this is one of the few statistical things in ArcGIS Online that trying to find variables that might relate to one another. You should know what you're doing when you do it. Same thing with this one, outliers. Statistically significant outliers in the patterns of your data. Again, finding outliers. And then point interpolation might be useful for somebody who's trying to figure out how to, you know, what what things might be related and how they might be related in a density map. And then you can do drive time. And I think this one, Nick, you probably do need networking. You need the network tool.
Uh, I'm not sure. I think that if you're using Esri, it's just a road network, like the national road networks. I think that it works, but I
Okay.
don't think that you can. Like, you wouldn't have the tool set to create your own network and use that. So I'm not quite sure. I'd have to try it, but I think that it does work.
Well, we won't do it because I know it would take time.
It typically is slow.
The I did this for health facilities in the state of Vermont in a project that was pretty good. You know, how many doctors within 30-minute drive of how many people were within a 30-minute drive of a health or a hospital. It's a pretty interesting analysis you can do. So I find that one probably be useful for some of the projects people might do. And this one here, you know, you got me. I don't know. I'm not a big
Generate.
guy.
Oh, I'll tell you. I know exactly what I'm going to use this for.
Tell me.
It's nothing that's going to save lives, but those hexes. Here's my plan, Brigade network. I'm going to use this to generate a hex grid of the United States, and then I'm going to put our Brigade hex stickers into the appropriate
Oh, very clever.
locations across the states.
Very clever.
Um, but it's a nice way to if you've got a density diagram or a density layer and you want to break it up a little bit so it's not smooth and you want it to be a little more classified, but you don't want it to be down to individual points or something like that. You can break up an area with the tessellations.
Anyway, there's an amazing array of tools here. Find nearest. You know, again, it's the nearest park from here. Can I reach something in the shortest time? Um, Unbelievable. Oh,
Okay.
Nick, you did.
I will take over real quick and finish this off. So, oops. So, paying the piper is here we are. This isn't exactly something the brigades using the Code for America ArcGIS Online license need to think about heavily at the moment, but effectively, you know, ArcGIS Online, like any cloud platform, has a price that you pay, and ArcGIS Online does this by making you spend credits. So you buy packages of credits from them, and then you spend those credits to accomplish your various goals. So storage of data costs credits. Different types of the data will cost different types or different amounts of credits. So storing points and lines and polygons costs less than it costs to store raster data such as aerial imagery. At the same time, anytime you're doing processing, so all of the tools that we just covered, all the analysis tools where you select a couple inputs and let it run and process an output, that costs credits as well. And then there's premium. I think premium data is really what I should have said, like premium data sets that Esri will charge extra for access to, although I don't think that you're going to accidentally run into those. So there's a link here which goes specifically to the ArcGIS Online credit page. Is my zoom off? It is. That would explain a lot why it seems so small. Okay. And it gets into explaining the incredibly complicated system for how they charge for things. So the cost of feature storage is 2.4 credits, 2.4 per 10 megabytes monthly, calculated hourly. Um, geocoding. So when you match a address, if you have a Excel spreadsheet of something of interest, say food shelves, and all you have are addresses but not latitude and longitude, you can geocode those. You can feed those addresses into a geocoding system, which will spit out the latitude and longitude based on the address. It'll cost you 40 credits per 1,000 geocodes, and on and on. So, yeah, even for running Jupyter notebooks and Python on their system, which we don't really cover in any of our sessions, but anything that you do in ArcGIS Online costs some credits. Now, Code for America is basically been gifted with credits, and so as a user of the Code for America organization, you would be using some of Code for America's credits to accomplish your goals. Right now, we're not too worried about it. At some point in the future, we may need to do quotas per brigade or quotas per user if there's a particular user that's using up all the credits. It's not currently an issue, but it's just something to be aware of whenever you see credits as a topic in the documentation or in any of the help information. That's what they're talking about, is this credit system, and it applies significantly to people that have a free ArcGIS Online account, because you can sign up and get one free. And if you do that, you get something like 250 credits, which if you're storing a few point layer files or point feature layers, that's fine. It's going to last you a little while. But if you do, a national scale analysis of crime data, you're not going to be able to finish that analysis with 250 credits. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're working through a solution in ArcGIS Online.
So, Nick, is each person's credits showing up when they log in?
I don't think that we have currently assigned credit quotas to people.
Okay.
And yeah, I need to talk with Esri more about what they want to do for a plan. I think part of it is just seeing what brigades do with the license and with the tools here. If only a few brigades are making heavy use of the system, then we'll be fine. If all of the brigades got on board and started doing all sorts of amazing stuff, then we might need to figure out how to share those credits more equally.
Yeah, so the other question I have is, I noticed in the content now, you can look at the content of the brigade.
Yes.
And,
which I have somewhere. Here we go. Content. So my organization.
I'll try to clean up some of my mess earlier.
But, yeah, David, what's all this stuff you've been creating? I mean, test table. I mean, I created that. I can delete it. It's a lot of this stuff is people playing around, but I'm hoping some of these things are people actually trying to I don't know. I haven't looked through it enough to see what people have been creating, but.
And there's only 2 people on the site right now. But I mean, as you build a project and you want specific help, Nick or I can actually help you or work with you. I'm a junkie, so I love helping build things that might help society.
We've got stuff created by a lot of these, maybe test creation of data as well. Jeremy Hansen created some Vermont House districts. Mike Chase. Yeah, so anyway, as brigades work together to build things, we can also share them more easily through the groups. The data that you create has permissions and can be shared not just either with yourself or with your organization or with the public, but also to specific groups. So Code for BTV has data that might be shared specifically for Code for BTV, not to keep other brigades out, but to make it easier for us to find our data as a subgroup within the larger Code for America organization. There's,
Oh my God, you used 99 credits.
the last 24 hours. That's all you. That's all that analysis you can do.
I think the data extracted, the data enrichment uses up quite a bit.
So, does anybody have any questions? Eric, Gwen, do you have any questions or anything you want to ask about while we're here? Are you asleep?
No. Yeah, well, actually, it should be my siesta right now. I'm in the West Coast.
Oh. Well, thanks for coming to us during the siesta.
Okay. So, one thing that I'm curious about is crowdsourcing data, such as using Survey123. What kind of is there any easy way to see what that data looks like when you pull it in?
Let's
or do you
do
have
it
to actually,
right
go
now.
through it?
Let's just, since you're asking, let's just do it right now. And since you're here and you're not leaving, I'll
Captive.
do something. I'm going to create a new survey with the web designer. I'm going to create a test, and this should give you a pretty good idea of what happens for that data that you're creating, and hopefully it. So let's see. You create a let's see, multiple choice, and we're going to also have, I don't know, let's say a rating, and we're going to have a comment thing that might happen at the end. I'm not even going to customize these further. I'm just going to drop them in like that. Question 1, question 2, question 3. We know that there's lots of customization that can happen here, and we'll get into Survey 123 more heavily in a future session. But question 2 might be rate the homeless shelters capacity, or I don't know, let's say bedding quality. I don't know, maybe. And what's the first one is favorite public library. You get to choose some different things. You get to go through, and when we save it and then go to publish, there's this fairly important modify schema button, which lets you see what is the data sort of going to look like on the inside when you're collecting it. So at this point, you can change it. This is the question. This is how it's going to be named in the feature layer. So it's going to create a feature layer that stores it, and that feature layer is going to have, for this, let's say Q1, I don't want to call it untitled question 1, I'm just going to call it Q1. It will have basically values of choice 1, choice 2, or choice 3 that show up in that. And we can call this Q2, and we'll call this Q3. So now that I've done that, I can publish it. And so when it publishes the survey, it creates both the web browser accessible form of the survey. It creates the I don't even know how it's stored. I'm going to say JSON or XL format that gets downloaded to the native app. And I know it sounds weird to say it in Excel format may be downloaded to the native app, but I'm not actually that far off the way that it's done. And at the same time, it's also creating a feature layer to store the data. So we can look at the data. Okay, let's see. Collaborate. Here's the. I want to open my survey. Fill it out. Choice 1 and choice 2. I've got a 4 out of 5, and this is some notes. I'm going to submit my record. Okay, so now I've done that. I should have data in here all of a sudden. It doesn't know where I'm at because I'm using a web browser on a computer that's a desktop computer, so there's no GPS information. If it was on a mobile phone or a laptop that had some GPS derivable information, it might put it elsewhere on the map. But here's the record that was stored. Now you can view it in this format, but the actual thing that was created, if you go back to, and you have to actually hit reload for it to pick this up. The actual thing that was created, I gotta find it now. Where is it? All my content, right? Form, test, field worker, stakeholder, test. Okay, so these things, they're, okay, test table was created earlier. We're gonna delete that so it's not confusing. Test is what I named the survey. It creates a thing called test stakeholder, test field worker, and you can see that this is a hosted feature layer. It also creates two views on that feature layer, and then it stores the actual definition of the survey in this form here. If we go and look at this feature layer that was created, Eric, it is then, it's a totally standard feature layer, which means that you can go from here and you could open it in Map Viewer, and you'll see, well, it's going to zoom to somewhere in the African Ocean coastal area for my data point that was collected without geospatial information. This is a place called Null Island by Joke of all geospatial geeks. It is the default location for data that doesn't actually have a spatial location. So no matter how much you zoom in, you'll never find anything. But that's, if you find data that's off the coast of Africa, there's a pretty good chance that it was just data that was created with no spatial information at all. So it says 00 for lat long or whatever, and that's where it is. But now that we've pulled it up on the map, we can go back to look at the table, the attribute table of it, and we'll see. I chose choice 1, choice 2. I gave it 4-star rating, and I put some notes in, and that's what it is. It's just a feature layer that they put a fancy survey interface in front of, and so that means that you can integrate this feature layer with other tools such as dashboards and story maps and all the various. Where are they? Okay. Go back to content.
And then circling back to something from one of the slides, if you were to say enable taking pictures with that, that would be an attachment.
Okay, yeah. So go to test. Yep, and we'll look at the data tab, and it's enabled, I guess, by default photos and files for a survey 1, 2, 3 feature layer. So if you just create your own feature layer from the content create feature layer thing, it may or may not end up with attachments enabled. But for survey 1, 2, 3, they typically encourage people to have a like a field in the design for, like, if you wanted to do images, if you wanted to allow images, then you can take it with the camera. It's going to be attached as an attachment.
That's cool.
And so you would view them if they were attached here, or you could add your own, right? So I could post attach something depending on what it was. For a survey, that wouldn't make any sense, but for other data sets, such as, let's say, a new data set of all the public, I don't know, libraries, I'm just going to make something up off the top of my head, and you want to post PDF flyers that they have created, or maybe links to websites or something, you could add sort of additional content related to those new institutions here that are not images necessarily, but they could be other documents as well. Does that help you with your question?
Yeah, that gives me a much broader understanding how the data gets stored from different areas.
Good.
And there was also like you said, let me take my notes here. Related tables.
Yeah.
Is that like in SQL? Would that be like an inner join or something?
Yeah. It's sort of sort of like that. It's not quite as hard as a join. So instead of seeing a new data set that is derived as a combination of two or more other data sets, it's saying I've got a data set. So let's say it's a parcel, and on that parcel there's a related record of building projects. Now the building project record information is not actually stored as part of the parcel data, but you create a relation that says, based on the town's parcel IDs, I know that those parcel IDs will match up to the parcel ID field in my projects feature layer. And so then you include both of those things into your web map, and it'll know when you click on a parcel to display a link to say show related records of projects. And then you can click on that and it will kind of jump over to show the related projects for that parcel, and then you can navigate back. So it's a way of creating relationships between things, but they're not as hard and fast as joins or views are that appear to be new data sets. It doesn't actually create a new data set. It just lets you relate existing data sets.
Back to Survey 123, one of the nice features, and maybe this is available in most survey projects, is that you can, if the answer is yes, you go to the next question. If it's no, you go to the next question. You skip the next series of questions.
Yeah, skip logic.
So you make it.
It's got
helpful.
something
And you can actually edit this thing in a spreadsheet, Excel survey sheet.
There's this XLS forms. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
This is one of the weirdest things I've ever learned about, I think, in computer form stuff. But Survey 123 is based off of this spec.
Oh, wow.
I don't know where it came from. I don't think it's from Esri. I think it's from some other place. But
Right, it's not from Esri.
It came from Esri?
No, it didn't.
I didn't think so. Yeah, anyway, it's this open spec for how to generate forms based on an Excel spreadsheet. And so the core Survey 123 product is actually this thing called Survey 123 Connect, which runs on a desktop computer, Mac or Windows, that reads in an XLS form spec and spits out a file that can then be loaded into the native app on a mobile phone, for example. And that has a significantly more customizability than the web version. So it's pretty cool. Definitely worth looking into if you're trying to do a complex survey.
Interesting. Never heard of this.
The relationships, quickly, as David mentioned earlier, relationships, unfortunately, you can't define them in ArcGIS Online. People complain about this frequently, so we hope that at some point they will fix this. But you currently can only create relationships with their desktop tools, ArcPro or ArcGIS Desktop.
Yeah, there was a fairly deep hint that they're deduplicating all of their products starting next year. They had their big product reveal about 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And they dropped some pretty heavy hints that some products are just going to disappear and get amalgamated all into one platform. So
yeah,
hopefully.
well, that would be. David and I have been to their developer conference many times, and there is significant duplication. It is amazing how many different product teams they have for a company of their type, and yeah, it can be overwhelming trying to figure out which product or app or tool that they're producing that you want to use, and then if there's something wrong with it, the people, there's such like siloed little groups of people working on things. It can be really hard to unravel certain why it works here but not in other places. So they're continuing to improve. It's taking time, but
some of the things that they were showing off were like the usability analysis tool that they're getting ready to deploy.
Right.
That thing was wild.
It is.
Yeah, they've got I don't even know what to say. They've got great stuff that they come up with, and again, I think within the Code for America community, there's so many tools that we could be making use of here that we have access to that people don't know about. And
so now that's the pitch for projects, right?
Yeah.
There's a big hole in Burlington.
The what?
There's a big hole in Burlington.
Oh, right. The big city place hole. Yeah. So if you have ideas for projects that you want to work on, Eric or Gwen, and you want to pitch them or bring them back to us next time or whatever, feel free to stay in touch with us and let us know. And we're certainly interested in helping you push your projects for civic good along. I think I had the slideshow open, but I don't know what happened to it. So, here it is.
I'll do some evangelism with Open Data Delaware next time we have a meetup.
Yeah.
If anybody needs any mapping for their civic tech.
Yeah, if they have ideas, and yeah, you can be the one that just lights the fire that, hey, we have access to this stuff. We could be doing things. It won't cost us anything. It won't cost our clients anything. It won't cost the town anything. It won't cost Code for America anything. We could be using these tools. So
yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Gwen, you're all good? She's actually taking a nap now.
Yeah.
Siesta.
Good.
Okay.
So go and stay safe in California. That's all we care about.
Yeah, right. Good. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. And we'll touch base later.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.